The night my sister-in-law emptied our bank account, I was asleep just 10 feet away. That's the line that keeps replaying in my mind even now. Sometimes it hits me in the middle of the day, like when I'm washing dishes or folding laundry, and I feel a tightness in my chest, as if my own home is reminding me of what happened under its roof. Other times it sneaks up on me when the house is quiet, late at night, when everyone's asleep and the refrigerator hums just a little louder than usual. I never imagined betrayal could walk so casually through a hallway, wearing my slippers, drinking my orange juice, calling me sister. I suppose that's how betrayal works. It doesn't kick down your door. It doesn't wear a villain's cape. It slips in politely, with a smile soft enough to fool you. But let me start from the beginning, before the whispers began, before the missing money, before the cold realization that the person I was feeding and sheltering was peeling my life apart one transfer at a time. Back then, life felt stable. Maybe not perfect but comfortably predictable. My name is Marissa, though everyone calls me Mari. I'm 42, married for 12 years to a man named Julian, who has a laugh that used to shake the walls, and a habit of drumming his fingers on any available surface when he's nervous. We live in a small, cream-colored house at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac where most mornings smell like cut grass and someone's leftover coffee. Julian works maintenance at a manufacturing plant. I'm a receptionist at a dental clinic, the kind where you can smell peppermint toothpaste the moment you walk in, and every patient swears they floss sometimes. We aren't rich, but we've always been responsible, steady savers, cautious spenders, the kind of couple who planned for emergencies long before the emergencies came. Then came Serena. Serena, my sister-in-law. Julian's younger sister. 25 years old, quick-talking, doe-eyed, and every bit as charming as she was irresponsible. When I first met her, she hugged me so long I didn't know whether to laugh or pat her back. She smelled like coconut oil and vanilla body spray, the kind teenagers wear when they're still figuring out who they are. Back then I thought her sweetness was genuine. Maybe part of it was. But survival can make sweetness feel like strategy. Serena had always had trouble keeping herself together. Job hopping, impulsive decisions, too many friends who came and went. But she was family, and Julian loved her deeply. Whenever he talked about her, he'd get this softness in his voice, the softness of an older brother who raised her more than their own mother did. So when Serena called one Sunday evening, crying so hard she could barely speak, Julian put the phone on speaker so I could hear the words that changed everything. "Jules, can I stay with you? Just for a little while. I have nowhere else to go." I remember the moment vividly. I was stirring a pot of chicken stew, the steam fogging my glasses. The kitchen smelled like thyme and garlic, and the windows were cracked open just enough to let in the chilly autumn breeze. When she said the words, "nowhere else to go," Julian looked at me, searching for my approval. And I nodded. Of course I nodded. What else was I supposed to do? Family helps family. That's always been my motto. Though sometimes I wonder if my heart is too soft for my own good. Serena arrived the next morning with 2 oversized suitcases, a garbage bag full of clothes, and a small cardboard box taped sloppily at the top. She smiled at me with puffy eyes and said, "Sister, thank you. I promise I won't be a burden." If I had known what was inside that promise, I would have locked the door and prayed for strength. In the beginning, things were smooth, almost pleasant. Serena stayed in the guest room. She washed her dishes, kept her voice low in the mornings, and helped fold laundry while humming under her breath. Some nights she'd sit with me in the living room while Julian dozed on the couch, and she'd tell stories about growing up, about how she always admired our relationship. She'd say, "You two are so lucky. You don't know how rare it is to have this kind of peace." I believed her. I believed her with the sort of trust that only comes when someone looks at you with glossy eyes, and the right mix of vulnerability and admiration. She'd been with us for 3 weeks when the first small shift happened. It was subtle, so subtle I brushed it off. I woke up one morning and walked to the kitchen to make coffee. When I reached for the mug I always use, the navy blue one Julian bought me years ago with the small chip in the handle. It was gone. Not missing. Just being used. Serena stood at the counter, drinking from it. "Morning, sister," she said with a smile. "I hope you don't mind. Your mug is just the perfect size." "It's fine," I said. Because it was, wasn't it? It was just a mug. I shook it off. I shook off a lot of little things those first few weeks. Like how she'd borrow my lotion without asking. How she'd start showers just as I planned to take one. How she'd sit on our bed during long conversations with Julian, back pressed against the headboard as if the room belonged to her too. None of it felt malicious. Just inconsiderate. Youthful. Looking back, I can see how the small things were testing the boundaries I didn't realize I needed to protect. But the very first real clue, the one I should have paid attention to, came one night when I woke up around 1:30 a.m. to get water. That's when I heard voices in the kitchen. Soft. Urgent. Whispering. I froze in the hallway, my hand resting lightly on the wall for balance. Julian's voice. No, he was snoring softly in our room. Serena. And someone else. A man's voice, low, serious. I stood there, heart tapping quietly against my ribs. Then I heard it. I just need more time. Just a few more weeks. I promise. I have access, I told you. Access to what? Access to who? My skin prickled. Serena's tone was rushed, almost panicked. Please stop rushing me. If they catch me. I stepped forward instinctively, and the floor creaked beneath my slipper. Sudden silence. Then the sound of a chair scraping slightly. A drawer closing. A hurried shuffle. I turned the corner into the kitchen, but by the time I arrived, the back door was swinging lightly, as if someone had just slipped out. Serena stood near the sink, wide-eyed, holding a glass of water. "Oh, sister," she said, her voice too bright. "I couldn't sleep, so I made some tea." "Who were you talking to?" I asked quietly. She froze for half a second. Just half a second, but enough. "Oh, no one," she said, waving her hand. "I talk to myself sometimes. Clears my head." I didn't believe her. But she smiled so innocently, and I was tired, and it was late. So I let it go. For the last time. Because that conversation, that one moment, was the beginning of the end. And in just a few more weeks, I would wake up to find our savings account emptied, every last dollar gone. While I slept under the same roof as the woman who stole it. If I'm honest with myself, I knew something was shifting long before the money disappeared. But it's strange how the mind protects itself, how we cling to the idea that the people under our roof couldn't possibly mean us harm. After that late-night whispering incident, I told myself Serena was just stressed. Maybe she'd gone outside to talk to a friend. Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe I was reading too much into things. That's the thing about suspicion, it starts like a soft itch. You notice it, then convince yourself it's nothing. Until it grows into something you can't ignore. A few days after that night, I began noticing small inconsistencies. One Thursday morning, I logged into our joint checking account before paying a bill. I'm not obsessive about money, but I like to keep track of things, old habit. The balance looked a little lower than usual. Not drastically, just off. There was a $74 withdrawal I didn't recognize. I asked Julian that evening, while he was tying his boots for work. He frowned. 74. No, that wasn't me. Maybe it's a monthly fee or an auto-renewal. I suggested. He shrugged. We can check later. I told myself it must be a mistake. Banks mess up sometimes. Systems glitch. But something about that number sat weirdly in my stomach, like a pebble inside a shoe. The next clue came from something so ordinary it almost slipped past me. It was a Sunday morning. I had just finished washing the sheets, and I brought Serena a fresh set of towels. Her door was slightly open, so I knocked gently and walked in. She was on her bed, laptop open, typing quickly. When she saw me, she snapped it shut so fast the screen made a clapping sound. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Oh. Yes, yes." She stood, smoothing her shirt. "Just applying for jobs." Her cheeks were flushed. Her hands trembled slightly. "What kind of jobs?" I asked lightly, setting the towels on her dresser. "Oh, you know," she waved vaguely. "Administrative. Retail. Customer service. Whatever I can find." I nodded. "Well, let me know if you need help polishing your resume." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. When I turned to leave, something caught my attention on the edge of her bed, a slip of paper with numbers. Columns, rows, amounts. One of the numbers looked familiar, 74.00. The exact same strange withdrawal I'd seen 2 days ago. Before I could look closer, Serena casually draped a blanket over it. Too casually. "Anyway, sister," she said brightly, "I'll come help you cook in a bit." I forced a smile. "All right." But inside, that pebble in my stomach grew heavier. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Julian trusted her, loved her. And truthfully, I'd grown fond of her too. For all her flaws, she carried a sweetness, a fragility that made me want to shield her. But sometimes the people we protect are the very ones undoing us. A week later on payday, Julian handed me his folded paycheck for deposit, a habit he'd had since we married. I took it to the bank during lunch. After depositing it, I checked our savings account, something I did once every couple of weeks. My finger hovered over the refresh button. When the balance appeared, I blinked. Then blinked again. There was less money in the savings than I remembered. A lot less. My heart thudded once, sharply. Had we paid something large recently? A repair? A bill? I scrolled. My breath hitched. Transfer, $250. Transfer, $180. Transfer, $320. Transfer, $74. Transfer, $295. Transfer, $150. All marked online transfer external. Over $1,200 gone in a 2-week period. I felt my mouth go dry. The bank lobby suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. For a moment I couldn't tell if I was hot or shaking or both. No one else used our savings. No one had access. Just Julian. And me. And Serena. A cold thought slid through me. She had asked Julian a week ago to help her check something on the online banking app because she'd locked herself out of her email and needed to verify something. I hadn't thought twice about it. He'd sat next to her on the couch, tapping through the app. Did she watch him enter the password? A chill rolled across my arms. I left the bank with a pit growing in my stomach, so deep it felt bottomless. I waited until that night to bring it up. Julian was in the garage tinkering with his toolbox. Serena was in her room with the door closed. I walked up to him, my hands trembling slightly. "Jules," I said softly, "have you taken any money out of our savings recently?" He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Savings? No." "Why?" I swallowed. "Because over $1,200 is gone." He turned to me sharply. "What?" "I checked the account today." He set the wrench down slowly. "Show me." We sat at the dining table, the overhead light flickering just slightly, one of those tiny annoyances I kept telling myself we'd fix soon. I opened the banking app and handed him the phone. I watched the color drain from his face. "Mari. I didn't do this." "I know." But the truth was sitting quietly between us, unspoken but loud enough to fill the whole room. Julian looked toward the hallway, toward Serena's room, and then back at me. "You think Serena," he trailed off, shaking his head. "No. She wouldn't. She's careless, but she's not that." The denial in his voice hurt more than the missing money. "Then who?" I whispered. He didn't answer. We sat in silence for a long moment. The house felt too still, too artificial, like it was holding its breath. "Let's ask the bank," he finally said. "Maybe it's fraud." But even as he said it, his voice carried no conviction. The next morning, another clue revealed itself, not by chance but by carelessness. Serena had gone out to run errands. While tidying the living room, I noticed her cardigan draped across the couch. When I lifted it, something fell out of the pocket. A small receipt. Folded, crinkled, torn slightly at the corner. The moment I read it, my stomach twisted. It was from an electronics store. A large purchase. Paid with online transfer, digital wallet. The amount? $295. We both knew. The same amount missing from our savings. My hands went cold. My vision blurred. I felt betrayed, but more than that, I felt stupid. Stupid for trusting. Stupid for giving someone a home. Stupid for ignoring every clue my gut had screamed at me. I sat down slowly on the couch, the receipt trembling between my fingers. My home didn't feel safe anymore. Not because a stranger had broken in, but because someone I embraced like family had been quietly robbing me, right under my roof. And I knew the truth was coming. And once it arrived, there would be no going back. I didn't confront her right away. Maybe I should have. But betrayal has a strange effect on a person. It doesn't always spark anger. Sometimes it brings a quiet, paralyzing disbelief. A numbness. For the rest of the day, that receipt stayed tucked in my apron pocket like a thorn under the skin. I kept touching it without meaning to, as if checking whether it was still real. Every time Serena laughed in the kitchen, or asked me where the sugar was, or hummed while folding her laundry, I felt a tightness spread inside my chest. How could she act so normal? How could she look me in the eye? By evening, the tension inside me was so thick it felt like a second heartbeat. Julian got home late, exhausted, dust on his boots, smelling faintly of engine oil. He loosened his collar and leaned against the doorway. "Any news?" he asked quietly. I shook my head, then pulled out the receipt. His eyes widened. He took it from my hand slowly, scanning the total. $295, he murmured. "Same as." "I know." He inhaled through his nose, a deep, pained breath. "Mari, we can't assume." "Then what are we supposed to do, Jules?" "Wait until the account hits zero." He rubbed his forehead, eyes squeezed shut. He wasn't angry at me, he was angry at the world for cornering him, forcing him to choose between loyalty and truth. Before he could answer, we heard her footsteps in the hallway. Serena emerged, a bowl of cereal in her hands despite it being nearly 9 p.m. "Hey, family," she said cheerfully. "You guys want some?" I used the cinnamon milk. "It's..." Her eyes flicked between us. She paused. "What's wrong?" The air in the room shifted, heavy, silent, wary. Julian tried to smile, but his voice trembled slightly. "Rena, we need to talk." Her hand froze around the cereal bowl, knuckles whitening. "About what?" He glanced at me. I nodded. "About the savings account," I said. She blinked, slow, deliberate, then let out a short, nervous laugh. "Oh. Is it still messed up? I remember you saying something about that." Her acting would have fooled a stranger. But not me. "Several large transfers were made," Julian said gently. She swallowed. Her throat bobbed. "Oh? Well, maybe the bank." "The bank doesn't make transfers to random digital wallets," I said. She stared at me, then at Julian, then back at me. Something flickered behind her eyes, fear, calculation, maybe even regret. Or maybe she was just deciding how much lying she had energy left for. I didn't touch you guys' money, she said quickly. Too quickly. Julian stood abruptly, pushing the chair back with a soft scrape. Rena, if you needed something, you could have talked to us. We would have helped you. Her face cracked for half a second, the mask slipping, before she caught it and smoothed it again. I didn't take anything, she repeated, each word clipped and controlled. I reached into my apron and placed the folded receipt on the table. Her eyes darted to it, then away. What's that? You tell me. I don't know. Why are you showing me paper like I'm supposed to memorize every? It's from an electronics store, I said quietly. You bought something. Using an online transfer. For the exact same amount missing from our savings. Her breathing changed. Quick, shallow, uneven. I didn't steal from you, she whispered, but her voice carried a tremor she couldn't hide. Julian stepped closer to her, just a foot away. His voice was soft, wounded. Rena, did you do it? She glanced at him, then at me, then at the receipt. Her lower lip quivered. For a moment I thought she might confess. Instead, she turned defensive. Oh, so now I'm a thief, she spat. After everything. After you let me stay here because you said you trusted me. You're avoiding the question, I said. And you're accusing me of something I didn't do. Julian lifted his hands helplessly. Then explain the transfers. I can't explain what I didn't do. Her voice cracked like glass. For a moment, all three of us stood frozen. The room felt small, too bright, too tight. Then she grabbed the cereal bowl and stormed toward her room. Y'all want to believe I'm stealing. Fine, she shouted over her shoulder. But don't expect me to sit here and get interrogated like some criminal. The door slammed so hard one of the picture frames rattled. Silence settled over the house, thick, suffocating, unfamiliar. Julian ran a hand over his face, then sank heavily into a chair. Mari, what do we do? I sat beside him, heart aching. It's only going to get worse. He didn't argue. Later that night, I passed Serena's door on the way to the bathroom. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the quiet, desperate sobbing inside stopped me cold. Soft, broken cries. The kind that came from shame, or fear, or guilt. My hand hovered near the door, unsure whether to knock. But I didn't. I walked away, guilt gnawing at me. Maybe part of me still wanted to believe she hadn't done it. Maybe part of me was afraid of what she'd say if she opened that door. Or worse, what she wouldn't. At 2:17 a.m., I woke to a faint glow under her door. Light from her phone. Movement. I tiptoed closer, holding my breath. Come on, she whispered. Before they find out, before they take it, before. My heart dropped. This wasn't the behavior of an innocent person. This was the behavior of someone preparing to run. Someone who knew the truth had finally cornered her. Tomorrow the truth would come fully into the light. Whether she wanted it to or not. And what happened next would change all three of our lives. Julian stared at me, then at the laptop screen, then back at Serena, his eyes flicking between us like he was watching a tennis match played in hell. What is this? He whispered. Serena didn't miss a beat. She's lying, she screamed, pointing at me with a shaking hand. She planned this, hacked everything again because she hates me. She's trying to ruin my life, Julian. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she collapsed into his arms, sobbing like a child. Julian stiffened. He didn't hug her back. He just slowly lifted his hands and placed them on her shoulders, gently, almost like he was helping a stranger sit down. Then he stepped away. Serena, he said softly, did you take the money? She gasped like he had slapped her. How can you even ask me that? I'm your sister. And that's exactly why I'm asking. Silence settled over us. Heavy. Thick. A silence that felt like picking through broken glass barefoot. Serena's eyes darted to mine, then the laptop, then the front door, as if calculating her escape. I didn't do anything, she whispered. I don't know how the money moved. I don't know how her name is the admin. She probably changed it last night after pretending to sleep. The way she said it, confident, smooth, told me she had rehearsed lies before. Maybe not for this moment, but for moments like this. Julian ran a hand through his hair, his eyes glassy. I watched you, he said quietly. For 2 weeks, I watched you act like you lived here. You wouldn't clean up after yourself. You'd yell at Mari for the smallest thing. You'd storm into our room without knocking. His voice cracked. And last night I saw something. Serena froze. Julian swallowed hard. At 2 a.m, I came downstairs to get water, and you were in the living room with your phone and Mari's purse. You jumped and shoved it behind the couch when you heard me. My heart slammed against my ribcage. He saw that. He saw her. Serena's face went white, then red, then cold. You misunderstood, she said quickly. I dropped something behind the couch. I was just moving her purse out of the way. Stop, Julian whispered, shaking his head. Please. Just stop. He walked over to the couch and sank onto it, burying his face in his hands. And in that moment, I saw him break. Not the angry break I had expected. Not explosive rage. Something quieter. Sadder. The heartbreak of a man realizing the sister he loved wasn't the person he thought she was. Serena stepped closer to him. He flinched away. That small movement cut her more deeply than anything I could have said. She straightened, breathing fast. Okay, she said, wiping her eyes with shaking fingers. Since everyone wants to blame me, fine. Tell me how stealing money from a joint account benefits me. What would I even do with it? Huh? My stomach tightened. She didn't know I had found the new bank account earlier that morning. She didn't know I had seen her name sitting there next to almost every missing penny. Julian lifted his head. Mari, he said gently. Do you have proof? I nodded. My voice trembled, but I forced the words out. There's a new account. In Serena's name. Linked directly to ours. The funds were transferred there. Serena let out a wild, humorless laugh. Yeah, right. Show me then. Show me proof. I turned the laptop toward her. Her eyes hit the screen. And her face changed. Not surprised. Not confused. Caught. Her mouth opened but no words came out. Julian leaned forward, studying her expression with a kind of devastated clarity. You did it, he whispered. You actually did it. Serena's jaw clenched, trembling. Then, like a switch flipping, her expression hardened. So what if I did, she snapped. Julian reeled back like she'd punched him. You two live in some fantasy where you're always the victims, she spat, her voice trembling with rage. But I've been struggling for years, Julian. You never check in. You never help. You never offer. You left me to deal with everything on my own. We offered, he whispered, pained. You refused. You said you didn't need us. Because I didn't want charity, she screamed. Then her eyes slid toward me, sharp, jealous, full of something dark. And you, she hissed, you walk around like some perfect little wife. House always clean. Meals always ready. Bills always paid. Must be nice having the life I should have had. The words hit me like hot oil. So this was it. The root. The rot. Jealousy. Pure, bitter jealousy. Julian stood slowly. Serena, pack your things. She blinked, stunned. What? You need to go. Today. Right now. She laughed nervously. You're kicking me out? Over her? No, he said softly. I'm asking you to leave because of what you did. Because you tried to ruin our lives. Serena's lips curled. You're choosing her over me. No, he whispered. I'm choosing the truth. She stared at him with a look I had never seen on her before, hurt, betrayal, rage all tangled into something sharp. Then she grabbed the pillow on the couch and threw it across the room. You'll regret this, she screamed. Both of you. Julian's voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. I already do. Silence dropped like a curtain. Serena looked between us, one last desperate plea flickering across her face. But Julian had turned away, his shoulders slumped. She stormed down the hallway, slamming the guest bedroom door so hard the frames rattled on the wall. Julian sank back onto the couch, breathing slowly, like he was trying not to fall apart. I sat beside him, resting my hand on his back. He whispered, "How did we get here?" I didn't have an answer. Not then. But I stayed beside him while the house shook with the sound of Serena packing in fury. I stayed because that's what you do when someone you love discovers the truth and wishes they hadn't. And as her footsteps thudded through the hallway, a single, chilling thought whispered through my mind. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Serena didn't leave quietly. I knew that long before she came storming down the hallway with her suitcase half-zipped and clothes spilling out like a tantrum in fabric form. She stomped into the living room, her eyes blazing red, not from tears, but from humiliation she refused to let settle. You're both going to regret this, she spat, gripping her suitcase handle like she might use it as a weapon. You think you know everything. You think you're so righteous. Julian didn't look at her. He just said, "Goodbye, Serena." But she wasn't done, not even close. She took 2 steps forward and leaned right into my space, her breath hot with rage. This is your fault, she hissed. If you hadn't put ideas in his head. I lifted my eyes to hers. Calm. Steady. Done. I didn't put ideas in his head, I said softly. Your actions did that. Her face twisted, and for a second, I wondered if she might actually hit me. But then Julian stood, not aggressively, just with a quiet strength that made her step back. Serena, he said, if you ever loved me at all, don't make this worse. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and yanked her suitcase toward the door. But at the threshold she paused, turned, and delivered her final blow. You really think this ends with me walking out that door, she said, voice low and venomous. I'm not going to let you destroy my life. I'll fix this. One way or another. Then the door slammed so hard the pictures on the wall shook. And she was gone. For the first time in weeks, silence filled the house. Not peace, just silence. The kind that buzzes in your ears after chaos. Julian stood frozen, staring at the door like he was waiting for it to burst open again. After a moment, he whispered, I can't believe she did this. I didn't respond. Because I didn't know what to say without hurting him more. Instead, I placed a hand on his arm. He exhaled shakily, his eyes wet but not crying. She used to be my best friend, he murmured. My little sister. I took her to her first day of school. I taught her how to ride a bike. I stayed up with her when she had nightmares. His voice broke. I don't know this version of her. I don't recognize her anymore. I squeezed his arm gently. People change, I said. Sometimes in ways we don't see until it's too late. He nodded, but his expression told me he wasn't really hearing the words. He was drifting, caught between memory and reality. Between love and betrayal. I guided him to sit, and he dropped onto the couch like the weight of the day pinned him down. For a long time, neither of us spoke. We just sat in that dim room, listening to the ticking of the clock on the wall, the faint hum of the refrigerator, our own breathing. Finally, Julian whispered, "I need to call the bank." My stomach tightened. "If she moved the money," he said, rubbing his temples, "we have to report it before she tries to withdraw anything else." A knot formed in my throat. What if she already did? I asked. He looked at me, fear flickering in his eyes. "I don't know," he murmured. "But we have to find out." He grabbed his phone and stepped into the kitchen to make the call. I watched him lean over the counter, shoulders hunched, one hand gripping his hair. I didn't want to hover, but every second felt like it stretched into an hour. After what felt like forever, he returned. His face told me the answer before his voice did. "She withdrew most of it this morning," he whispered. Before we woke up. My heart sank. "How much is left?" "Barely anything." He collapsed onto the couch again, covering his face with both hands. The air in the room shifted, colder, heavier. It wasn't just money. It was savings. Security. Dreams. Years of planning and discipline. Gone. My mind started racing: bills, mortgage, groceries, emergencies. What would we do? But then Julian lifted his head, defeat etched into every line of his face. "She stole from us," he said quietly. "From her own brother." He looked at me, eyes glassy. "I have to report it," he whispered. "I don't want to, but I have to." My heart ached for him. For the boy he once was. For the man he was now, forced to choose between justice and blood. I sat beside him again, gently placing my hand over his. "We'll do it together," I said. He swallowed hard. "She's going to hate me," he murmured. "She already chose her path," I replied softly. "Now we have to choose ours." He nodded slowly, but there was a distant look in his eyes, like he was grieving something invisible. And in a way, he was. By that afternoon, he had filed a report with the bank and spoken to someone at the local precinct. Not a full police report yet, but a formal complaint that flagged the account. We spent hours in silence afterward, both of us processing different versions of the same pain. By evening, Julian finally lay down on the couch, exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. I draped a blanket over him and sat on the floor beside him, leaning against the couch. Just keeping watch. Just keeping close. And that's when the doorbell rang. Sharp. Loud. Too loud. Julian sat up. We exchanged a look. My stomach sank. I already knew who it was. We both did. He stood slowly, like every step weighed 100 pounds, and walked to the door. When he opened it, I saw her before he spoke. Serena. Standing there with 2 police officers behind her. Her expression. Smug. Cold. Vindicated. And that's when I knew. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to retaliate. Julian froze at the door. The officers stood like statues, notebooks in hand. And Serena, she stepped forward, her lips curling in a calculated smile. "Julian," she said, voice sweet but edged with steel, "I think we need to talk about the money." He swallowed, throat tight. His eyes flicked to me. I gave him the tiniest nod, steady, silent support. One officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said, glancing at Serena. "We have a report regarding unauthorized transfers from a joint account. Can you confirm your identity?" Serena blinked, slow, deliberate. Then she smiled wider. "Of course," she said smoothly. She gave them her ID, her tone practiced, calm. The other officer jotted notes. "The transfers were traced to an account in your name. The total amount taken matches our client's complaint." She didn't flinch. Didn't stumble. Didn't seem the least bit nervous. Julian stepped back from the door. I felt him shaking, not with anger but with disbelief. "How could she be so calm?" he whispered. I squeezed his arm. Because she's used to getting away with it. The officer looked at Julian. Sir, we need to ask some questions. Would you mind coming inside? Julian hesitated but nodded. I followed, standing close behind him. Serena lingered at the doorway, smiling faintly, as if she were already enjoying the next chapter of her story. Inside, the officers began documenting the transfers. Screens were checked, phones were examined, signatures verified. And Serena watched. Every detail. Every scratch on the countertop. Every expression on our faces. Like she was memorizing our defeat. At one point, Julian muttered, barely audible, I can't believe this. My own sister. I placed a hand on his back. She made her choices. We don't have to understand them to act. The officers finished their questions and prepared to escort Serena out for questioning. She didn't resist. Not outwardly. But the glance she shot us as she passed said everything, I'll come back stronger. You haven't won yet. Once the door clicked shut, the weight of silence pressed in. Julian sank into the couch, head in hands. I feel shattered, he admitted. I don't know how to look at my family the same way again. I knelt beside him. You're not alone. And she's the one who's changed, not you. He sighed, finally lifting his head. I can't believe she could do this. I raised her. Loved her. Trusted her. People we love can hurt us the most, I said quietly. But that doesn't make us weak. It makes us human. Julian closed his eyes. I know. But it still hurts. I nodded. And it's allowed to hurt. But we need to let the consequences follow her, legally, socially. That's how justice works. For the first time that day, he seemed to breathe a little easier. By the following week, the ripple of Serena's betrayal had spread. The bank froze the account she'd transferred money into. The police opened a full investigation. Neighbors, once oblivious to our family life, whispered quietly when Serena's name came up. Word traveled fast. People are always hungry for a scandal. And through it all, Julian and I rebuilt the trust we had in each other. Not instantly. Not magically. But piece by piece. We changed our passwords, cancelled old cards, closed the compromised accounts. We held long conversations about boundaries, about responsibility, about honesty. I learned how to balance empathy with self-preservation. Julian learned that love for a sibling doesn't have to come at the cost of your family's security. And Serena. She faced both legal consequences and social consequences. Friends turned away, employers grew wary, and the small community began to whisper stories that followed her like shadows. It wasn't vindictive. It wasn't about humiliation. It was the natural result of her choices finally catching up with her. One afternoon, Julian and I sat on the porch, the sun warm on our shoulders. I was folding laundry while he sipped coffee. Do you ever think about her? I asked quietly. He paused. Sometimes. But not in the way you might think. I think about what went wrong, and what we need to protect. I nodded. I think about how fragile trust can be. He smiled faintly, tired but genuine. And how strong it can be too, if you fight for it. I leaned my head on his shoulder. The house smelled faintly of fresh laundry and coffee, ordinary smells in an extraordinary day. I realized then that betrayal, while brutal, also had a gift. It reminded us what mattered. It clarified the people worth keeping close. It forced us to face the truth, no matter how painful. And as I sat there, warm in the sunlight, I felt something I hadn't felt for weeks, a fragile, tentative peace. The weeks after Serena's arrest were quiet but heavy. Julian and I spent hours repairing what had been broken, not just financially, but emotionally. The savings account could be replenished slowly, the lost money replaced over months, but the trust, the feeling of safety, the invisible shield around our home, took longer to rebuild. Every morning, I checked the doors, the locks, the bank notifications. Every time I felt that familiar prickle of worry, I reminded myself, this is our home. We are safe. We survived her betrayal. Julian was quieter than before. Thoughtful. Sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking, he'd stare at the guest bedroom door, now empty, and shake his head. It wasn't anger anymore, it was sorrow. A quiet mourning for the sister he thought he knew, the innocence he believed she still had. We never spoke much about Serena herself. Her name came up rarely, in hushed tones when bills needed clarification, or the officers called for follow-up. She had been removed from our lives in a way that was almost clinical but necessary. In the evenings, we started routines again, folding laundry together, cooking meals side by side, sipping coffee on the porch while the sun dipped low. I realized that healing doesn't arrive in dramatic bursts. It's small. Quiet. Gentle. One afternoon, while folding Julian's shirts, I noticed a crease in one of them, like he had slept in it. A small, ordinary detail, but it made me smile. He trusted me enough to be unguarded around me. That, more than any bank balance or locked door, was proof that we had survived. We also learned to communicate better. Julian admitted when he worried, I admitted when I was scared. There were no secrets. No hidden assumptions. Just honesty, sometimes blunt, sometimes awkward, always necessary. I stopped feeling that constant edge of suspicion. Not because Serena's betrayal had disappeared, it hadn't, but because we had created a barrier stronger than her deceit, vigilance, trust, and mutual care. And slowly, I noticed something else, forgiveness. Not for Serena, she had to face the consequences, but for ourselves. For allowing her in, for trusting her too easily, for being human and flawed. It wasn't shame that lingered, it was wisdom. One evening, Julian and I sat on the porch as the autumn air carried the faint smell of damp leaves. I never imagined this would happen, he said softly. Neither did I replied. But maybe that's the point. Life doesn't hand us stories with clear beginnings or neat endings. Sometimes it's messy, but we survive anyway. He nodded. And sometimes, the people we love show us their worst, and we still have to find a way to keep the good ones safe. I reached over and held his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. We learned that the hard way. Julian smiled faintly, tired but genuine. And we're stronger because of it. I looked at him, thinking of the weeks of whispered conversations, long nights, and heart-pounding revelations. The fear, the anger, the betrayal. And yet, here we were, healing, rebuilding, surviving. And I understood, in that quiet moment, the true lesson of our story. Betrayal hurts deeply, but it also teaches. It reminds us who we are, who we love, and what we will fight to protect. In the months that followed, life returned to a rhythm we recognized. The house felt like ours again. Julian and I celebrated small victories, a fully restocked pantry, bills paid on time, the first quiet Sunday morning without a thought of what Serena might do next. We laughed again. Lightly at first, then more freely. I watched Julian work in the garage, wiping sweat from his brow and grinning at some small, ridiculous joke I had made, and I felt a sense of normalcy I hadn't realized I missed. We didn't pretend the past didn't exist. But we also didn't allow it to define our future. And sometimes, in the quiet moments when I was alone, I thought about Serena. About the rage and desperation that had driven her. About how easily life can turn someone bitter. I didn't hate her anymore. Not truly. I felt pity. And sadness. And relief that she had chosen her path, and that Julian and I had chosen ours. Sitting on the porch one golden afternoon, I reflected on everything we had been through. I thought about trust and how fragile it is. I thought about boundaries and how important they are, even with family. I thought about love and how it sometimes means letting go, even when your heart aches. And I thought about the strength I had found in myself, the clarity that comes when you face someone's betrayal and survive it without losing your dignity. Life will always have storms. People will always disappoint. But I had learned something invaluable: no one can take away your peace unless you let them. I turned to Julian and squeezed his hand. His eyes met mine, warm and steady. Would we have survived this without each other? I asked quietly. He smiled, just faintly, the kind of smile that carried weight and reassurance. No. Not a chance. I nodded. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months: truly safe. Truly seen. Truly loved. Closing reflection/audience connection. If there's one thing I've learned through this, it's that betrayal is devastating, but it doesn't have to be final. Sometimes it opens our eyes to the people worth keeping close, the boundaries worth setting, and the resilience we didn't know we had. Life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about how we respond to it. Would you have done what I did? Would you have let her live under your roof, trusting family, even when your instincts screamed at you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I promise, I read every one. And if you've ever survived betrayal, even small, even quiet, remember, there's strength in healing. There's dignity in choosing peace. And there's life after the storm. Thank you for listening to my story. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, real, emotional, and sometimes heartbreaking, please subscribe. Your support helps me share these voices, one story at a time.